Hi, my name is Pete Palumbo, and you're listening to USModernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. One of the origins for California modernism was tuberculosis. The state's dry climate attracted medical professionals, people pretending to be medical professionals, and troubled patients looking for relief. Our guests today are Lyra Kilston, author of Sunseekers, The Cure of California, and the Cato Kalin of his generation, preservationist and perpetual house guest Josh Gorrell, who is inhabiting one of the houses featured in Lyra's book. Later on, special musical guest Valerie Wood will be coming by the studio too. And now, here's the guy who used to think peyotes were only available at Bergdorf Goodman, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hi, folks. Didn't I see Kristen Davis on Sex and the City totally rock a pair of red peyotes?
Yeah, I thought so.
I mean, that's such a good name for expensive designer shoes. Of course, peyotes means piers or columns that support a building above the ground. I prefer my definition a lot better. And I used to think Jimmy Choo was a kid's train set. But the bottom line is, Kristen Davis, please call me. Welcome to the show. U.S. Modernist Radio is starting up its 6th year from the Soundtrack Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, plus shows from New York, Los Angeles, and Palm Springs. We love our listeners and your guest suggestions, your reviews on iTunes, your likes and comments at Mr.Modernism on Instagram, and when you sign up for our exquisitely fun, curated trips to Palm Springs and Denmark and Dubai. U.S. Modernist has 2 major events in Palm Springs for Modernism Week 2020. First, a Hollywood-style gala benefit at the Kirk Douglas House on Wednesday night.
Well, that's going to be fun.
With servers buzzing with delicious appetizers, our signature cucumber vodka punch, plus a jazz singer crooning from his keyboard, and these amazing cocktail tables that light up from underneath.
And the servers aren't the only thing to buzz, George. There were drones there last year.
Yeah, we had a few of those.
Taking pictures.
Taking pictures, yeah. Of course, everyone's dressed up around the pool looking fantastic as the evening shifts into sunset and eventually the coolness of the Palm Springs nighttime. You'll swear you hear Frank Sinatra singing, and you probably will, even in the KFC. We also offer half-hour day tours of the Kirk Douglas Estate on the first Sunday of Modernism Week. You can sign up for both of these through the modernismweek.com website if they're not sold out already. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by our wonderful sponsors, Nichiha.com and modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In our continuing imaginary space saga, it's episode 9, and Deanne, an aspiring modernist from SETI Alpha 6.
You got to try the eel there.
And whatever you say. Contacts General Angela Roll on the hijacked Empire battle cruiser. With the Imperial crew still blissfully mesmerized and captive in the shuttle bay, this time by Michael Bublé singing Crazy Love.
Oh, baby.
General Angela welcomes Deanne aboard during a quick stop at Khan's Waffle House, where the breakfast is served cold. And soon they attack the Empire homeworld in fighters that look like Breuer's Wassily chairs and are equally as comfortable. The Emperor threatens to burn the last known copy of Dwell unless the modernist rebels retreat and stop criticizing the Empire's admittedly awful downtown redevelopment projects. Back here on Earth, this century's Angela Roll is your heroine of modernist houses, using her architectural training to specialize in modernist real estate, advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to speaking before the Galactic City Council. Angela Roll is your special modern real estate agent. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or call her 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. I met both of today's guests at a party that U.S. Modernist Radio threw earlier this year, and it turns out they have a lot in common. Lyra Kilston is a writer and editor focused on architecture, design, art, urbanism, and publication in the Los Angeles Review of Books, the Los Angeles Times, Next City, Artforum, Wired, Time, Art in America, and Popular Mechanics. No, I'm just making that one up. She is an editor for the Getty Museum, a consulting editor for Hyperallergic. Okay, I think I have a pillow from that company, and a fourth-generation Los Angeles citizen. Her first book is Sunseekers, The Cure of California. Welcome, Lyra.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Josh Gorrell is a preservationist who worked to save Rudolph Schindler's Van Dekker house, declared a historic landmark in 2010. Josh trained and worked with some of the best minds in preservation and design. Josh raised a huge amount of money for the Van Dekker house restoration with a T-shirt line called Frank Lloyd Wrong, a fashion accessory which sadly is no longer available. And currently, he's either house-sitting or holding the occupants hostage at the Lovell Health house, Richard Neutra's iconic Los Angeles creation that ushered in the California health craze. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
So, Lyra, what was this health movement exactly you wrote your book about? I always thought that it generated in the 60s with the hippie counterculture, but it goes back a lot further than that.
Yeah, well, from as early as around the 1870s and 1880s, people were being sent to California and the drier and warmer climate of the Southwest to help them heal from tuberculosis, which was, infecting something like, 1 in 4 people at the time. And doctors would literally prescribe residents of East Coast cities, especially crowded and, cold places like that, to leave where they were living and try to find a cure through sunshine and fresh air by heading to the Southwest. So there was a lot of belief in the curative powers of sunshine and warm climates, and living close to nature in certain cases, and taking hikes and eating a particular kind of more natural diet. And all of those beliefs ended up finding their way into architecture.
And did it work? I mean, if you came out and got some extra sun, did your TB go away or get better?
It wasn't a perfect cure, but I think that in some cases it probably extended some people's lifespan.
Well, it's a nice way to extend your lifespan. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are happening there along with moving out to Southern California, the diet, and all the other stuff. Something had to work.
Right, and it was an interesting time because public health officials did realize that some of these diseases, and in particular things like cholera and tuberculosis, were they were just figuring out the germ theory, and they realized that, of course, contagion is going to spread a lot faster in overcrowded cities, and this was a big concern both in the United States and in the cities of Europe. And so public health officials began working together with architects to figure out how to design less contagious housing and working conditions.
Now, was this architecture just limited to California, or did they try to do it in other climates?
Well, I think some of the early ideas about building for health really started in Europe, and they were brought to California by European architects like Richard Neutra.
What are some of the aspects of that kind of design?
Well, it started in the mid-1850s, where people realized in order to get away from these very, disease-ridden cities, that patients should be brought out to the countryside and allowed to rest and really take in the sunshine. And even if it was snowing, they would still be expected to lie outside on a chaise longue and maybe be covered with a fur blanket, but try to get in as much curative fresh air and sunshine as possible. And so initially, these sanatoriums, as they were called, were built in a traditional style with very thick walls and turrets and small windows. And eventually, people realized that the design of the sanatoriums themselves should change in order to accommodate these new ideas about health. So they wanted to make the windows bigger. They wanted to make the interiors white, not for any aesthetic reason, but actually just for the idea of sanitation and hygiene. And they wanted to put balconies everywhere and create these windows, and even, it even went down all the way down to the design of beds with wheels so that patients could just be pushed right out onto the terraces because they were supposed to be taking the sun cure, pretty much from dawn until sunset. So yes, the design of sanatoriums changed dramatically in the late 19th century.
I always thought that sanatoriums were for people who were mentally ill, but they were for people who had diseases specifically?
Yeah, there's a sanitarium and a sanatorium.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, and there is something for mental illness, but the sanatorium movement, it was sort of a cross between a hospital and a hotel, and it was for long-term stay, and a lot of people died when they went there anyway because they had advanced tuberculosis, but I think it did heal some people, and it was talked about famously in like Thomas Mann's book, The Magic Mountain. It became almost like just part of your culture, especially if you were of the affluent class in Europe.
By extending your life, I mean, at least you're spending the latter half of your life in a much more pleasant surrounding. So that's a win.
Certainly.
For my book.
Although it is a much more pleasant surrounding, except that you would be surrounded by everyone coughing all day and all night long.
Oh, yeah.
That's the downside of being in that same place, right?
Right.
It is the downside, yes.
Were there other institutions besides these sanatoriums that would be constructed for people? Did hotels take on this same kind of vibe with the California sun culture?
When they were called health seekers, these people who were pouring into Southern California as a last-ditch effort to save their lives or the life of a family member. And, the sanatorium movement was a little bit slower to develop in this region because the climate itself was considered so curative that in some cases people came and simply lived in a tent for a while because you could do that here. It never got cold enough to prevent that. But there were things like health hotels, they were called, that sprung up, and different kinds of boarding houses that took in tubercular patients. I think it was different in California. It was they were less reliant on the architecture because really all you needed to do was be outside. So in a lot of cases, a tent would work just fine. But until some of these architects from Europe came over with having seen these new developments in healthful building, that's when things really took off here that culminated in the Health House.
So this takes us to a fellow named Morris Saperstein, a.k.a. somebody else you'll tell us about. What was his story?
Well, he grew up in New York City, and he grew up in a pretty traditional family, but he got very excited as a young person in the 19-teens by a lot of progressive ideas that were swirling around the city, whether it was socialism or bodybuilding or vegetarianism. He would go to these lectures in New York and just, I think he felt like there was more for his life than what his family expected him to do. So he, like many people before and after, decided to head west and make his own destiny. And, he was very interested in this kind of what was called a physical culture movement that focused a lot on bodybuilding and health and diet and strength.
Is this bodybuilding like Charles Atlas comic book bodybuilding movement early on?
Yes, but sort of earlier than that.
Earlier than that, okay.
Well, Charles Atlas's ads were in the back of the comic book.
Yeah, right.
Right. But, this whole interest in physical culture and bodybuilding completely was an offshoot of the fact that so many people were ill. This is 50 years, 60 years before antibiotics existed or were popularly available. So there was a real crisis about health and, a real shame and embarrassment about the sort of weak invalid body, and people became really very fixated on bodybuilding really for the first time. So he got interested in all of these new ideas and probably picked up like some sort of chiropractic degree in the Midwest at some kind of energy healing college. And he ended up in Los Angeles and changed his name to Dr. Philip Lovell, ND, naturopath. And he opened up a practice in downtown Los Angeles, and it really took off. He became very successful and eventually became very interested in architecture.
So was there such a thing as an MD in naturopathy at the time? Or did you just make that up?
Well, ND.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And did he really get that degree? He changed his name.
He changed his name. I think he didn't feel that Morris Saperstein really spoke of the virile health that he wanted to convey. I think he liked Philip Lovell.
Yes, very strong California name. Like
Right.
John Wayne, they name airports after you.
Right.
Exactly.
He commissioned several houses from famous architects like Rudolph Schindler and Richard Neutra, ending in the classic Lovell Health house, which we'll talk about with Josh in a minute. What were those early commissions about? Were they health-oriented too? They
were. So he married this quite extraordinary woman named Leah Lovell, who had, was highly educated for her era and was interested in progressive education, some of which still exists today and some of our more progressive like Waldorf and Montessori schools. So she was involved. She became friends with Schindler's wife, Pauline. Because both of them were interested in running a school at the Hollyhock House that Frank Lloyd Wright was working on with Schindler on board as well. So this sort of circle of progressive Angelenos was formed. And meanwhile, Leah Lovell's sister, Harriet, they also commissioned Frank Lloyd Wright to build a house. And so Philip Lovell, he was here and he was practicing his naturopathic medicine, and he started writing a column on health for the Los Angeles Times. But he was really, through his wife, exposed to a very extraordinary circle of people who were experimenting with the newest architecture in the world. And it was normal for them to socialize in the house that Schindler was building for himself, or the house that one of the several houses that Wright was working on. So I think this really exposed Lovell to the possibilities of architecture and how they could embody different ideologies. And of course, because he was a naturopathic doctor and health advisor and sort of guru, he was reading a lot of the articles and journal pieces that were coming out of both European and American medical establishments that were talking about the relationship between housing and health. So this became his fixation, and he found some very sympathetic voices amongst Schindler and Neutra. They kind of immediately understood what he was going after, and their partnerships proved very fruitful.
Josh, the culmination of all of Lovell's efforts was his health house, now known as the Lovell House, was finished in 1929. Tell us about that house.
Well, when you talk about, Lyra talks about people getting outside and in the fresh air, which is very much a part of the healing process and also very much a part of this new modernist movement from the Germans and Austrians coming over, introduced to the Mediterranean climate of Southern California. You do have to ultimately live inside the house as well. And the modernism that was being created was really a stripping down of details and excessiveness, right? So Neutra's mentor, Adolf Loos from Vienna, actually wrote a book, Ornament and Crime. There could be all kinds of associations with his words in that book to different aspects of the social construct. But in a house, it could be a crime against your immune system, basically, because you've got, I'm always marvel at how many objects and things people cram into their spaces, and all you're doing is introducing another level of dust collection that you then either have to maintain properly continually or just forget about and then wonder why you're sneezing all the time. Also in this house, Neutra had introduced these different sleeping basket arrangements. Now, if you look at it practically, and this is where I often talk about how houses hold people hostage. Just think about a typical relationship with a couple that share a bed. Well, if someone's snoring, you don't really have too many options to just jump into another space and get away from the snoring person or whatever kind of ailments they're battling through if they've got a cold or something. So there are these unique and different sleeping settings that could go from 2 to 1 and back again throughout the house, I think speak of the other ideologies that, again, go back to happiness. Ultimately, the world over is going to start in a bed, in a bedroom, in a bathroom, a kitchen, and a house. And Neutra was no better.
And in a basket?
Yeah, what's the sleeping basket thing?
Well, they call them sleeping baskets. They refer to them as sleeping baskets. There's a couple of them at places like the Gamble House. This was where tuberculosis patients would be able to sleep outside and really just get that constant, clean air.
Sort of like a hammock, maybe.
Well, I guess the term basket, think of more of the reed-based squared baskets, I guess. But yeah, it's
okay, not like an Easter basket.
No, it could be if it's, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a weird name for it, a sleeping basket. It's a bit odd.
Well, you could put chocolates on the pillow. That would sort of...
You could.
Yeah.
Josh, describe for our listeners what the Lovell Health House looks like.
Oh, well, it's definitely, it really adhered to this new international modern movement that was starting to take place, being formulated in Europe. It's lovely. It's got massive amounts of fenestration and glass to allow enormous amounts of light in. But ironically, the advent of the house, it was actually curtained off really heavily with very heavy pleated and thick curtains. So ironically, you would not see much of the aperture of all the fenestration that he put up in the house. It was blocked largely by these curtains, which is weird. But now, today, we can enjoy all that. It's multi-level. It's basically, and I can attest to this now, it is built for being healthy. I mean, I average about 4.6 miles a day, 11,000 steps, and like 36 floors.
Oh.
You literally just can't get anywhere in this house without going up and down steps at some point.
You give your Fitbit a workout, huh?
I totally do. So then in the yard, originally there was just these big open areas for all kinds of sporting activities that were encouraged. They had drawn in a tennis court area that was never realized. They had a handball court, a basketball court, several different aerobic and exercise areas and possibilities, a freshwater swimming pool down below that was no chlorine. They'd empty out the fresh water and water the yard every 2 weeks, I read, and then fill the pool back up. So it was always freshwater swimming. And in that area, there was a lot of different kinds of aerobic and exercise equipment that could be associated with the water in the pool area. Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. Obviously, clean lines, very modern. The casement window interruptions were a necessary evil back then, but I actually liked them. And very much floating on these pilotes that George was speaking about at the beginning of the show.
They are great shoes, yeah.
They are the best pilotes ever. And it would be even better because the children's play area adjacent to the pool area that would have been on the other side of a white wall that was taken down and a big gate was put up to open those areas up. But both of those areas should have been opened with pilotes. The children's playroom was closed in and glass windows were added at some point to make it an interior space. But that lightness, starting on those sticks, on that western-facing part of the house was just gorgeous because then it goes up a level into this massing of glass and fenestration for the most part. Originally, there would have only been screens on half of that. So you really look at these open spaces that are supposedly holding up the entire structure, and then they accumulate into the one area that looks like and is and feels like a large massed area compared to the rest, which is the upstairs sleeping area, that has basically the most stucco and positive massing space. And I think he did that on purpose. Those actually were hanging off of the roof trusses instead of cantilevered. So I think he played on that geeky architectureness of that with the massing as well.
Josh, you know all of this because you're actually living in the Lovell Health House right now, right?
I am.
But you don't.
I call it surviving.
But you don't own it. You're renting, right?
No. Yes, I do.
You're not going to rent to own, are you?
I don't. I would have to come up with a really good business idea to do that. No, I'm just lucky enough to be able to live here and contribute to the cleaning and the maintenance of the property at this point, and just excited to see what happens next.
Do you have housemates? Are you the only one there, or what?
No. I'm actually still. I currently live with Ken Topper. He has been here for several years, helping out his mother, Betty Topper, who sadly just recently passed away. And so he's a resident. I'm a resident. So yeah, we're kind of an odd couple, but we get along, and there's plenty of space in this house. And he enjoys very much bringing people into the house and doing these tours. We've been giving tours, and we just started a movie night.
Well, hang on a second, Josh, because we've buried the lead here. So how did it happen that you are living in the Lovell house. I mean, how did you persuade Betty and Ken, or is Ken really just tied up in the basement? How does this work?
Well, no. Well, no. See, I hypnotize them.
Oh, David Letterman used to do that.
Yeah, she was easier because of her advanced age. Ken did snap out of the hypnosis. That's when I had to tie him up in the basement.
Okay.
And then he eventually saw things my way when I pulled the gun out.
I see.
And we've just been really happy since.
How did you do it?
Okay, so one day I was sitting around and I got a call from Ken, and he was asking me about some metal that needed to be cut off of one of the living room windows for these solar shades that were going to be put in to function properly. And I said, there's no metal being cut off of any windows. I'll stop all my appointments. I'm coming right over. Let me know your other thoughts on what you want to do with the house. So I came over, and he started to go over a series of things. And I said, the metal's definitely not being cut off the windows. Come on. And it was for a very, very, it was just basically the solar shade would rest on it and show that rim where these roller screens had connected to on 3 windows. So that's how it happens, though, right? You just have this simple, the solar shade guys didn't want to see a dimple when the shade was down, so we cut off the window.
Yeah, right.
And it's like this late in the game.
And we couldn't stop.
Yeah, it just couldn't be stopped. So I just kind of jokingly said, look, Ken, give me a key. I'm the head maintenance supervisor of the Lovell Health house starting immediately, and he's funny. He's like, oh, man, I don't care. I don't want to deal with it. You guys are always looking down, judging what we do over here. It's fine. You're an expert. I don't give a crap. Here, take it, And I was like, because, Ken is a smart man. And then I just joked about how there was all this space in the house and that you should just let me take a room, not expecting at all that the answer would be yes.
No. Josh and Lyra, George just stepped out to buy a pair of Pilates. He found them on sale. So we're going to take a short break from those relaxing words to hear these relaxing words from Nietzsche. Beauty, love, durability, designed to last for years to come, bringing you peace and tranquility. You feel relaxed, knowing your house can easily achieve any exterior look and any color. Wood, concrete. Your house loves feeling this good. And you love feeling this good. Nietzsche, 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 Nietzsche. Say it with me. Nietzsche. Advanced engineering. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Durability, textures, finishes, and colors. Visit Nietzsche.com/USModernist. Nietzsche, Nietzsche, Nietzsche. That's NICH. Wait for it. A look you'll love. Nietzsche.
After that moment of prayer, we are back.
Nice cloak, George.
Yes, thank you. So, Josh, this is not your first rodeo with a iconic house. Tell us about your work with the Van Dekker house.
Well, back about 2006, a friend and a group had purchased the Coon House one from 1936 up in the Hollywood Hills off Fairfax in Hollywood. And actually, that's where Julius Shulman got his start. That was the first place he started to take pictures of these cool and interesting houses on top of the hills. And Neutra was there that day and asked to see the pictures, and the rest, they say, is history. So that was very exciting. There was a good budget, and, I could eat, sleep, and, live that project and Neutra. At that time as well, we had interest in rebuilding the von Sternberg house. So I basically crunched everything Neutra from the Jardinette Apartments, 1926, to about the Nesbitt house, 1943, for the detailing. we decided to hold off on the von Sternberg house for various reasons.
That was the one that Ayn Rand owned or rented for a while?
Yeah, she owned it. Yeah. It was torn down because vagrants were invading the structure, hippies,
Damned hippies.
And damn hippies. And obviously the main reason was to, make way for tract homes and make a bunch of money off the real estate. And so, about 2009, the Van Dekker house, Rudolph Schindler, 1940 in Woodland Hills, was on the verge of getting torn down for the same capitalistic greed. I just couldn't let that happen. And so I was challenged to make it happen. And at the 11th and a half hour, I pulled together the cash to save it.
Did you sell that many T-shirts? I mean, that's a lot of T-shirts to sell.
It wasn't all T-shirts. I know that was noted in an article. I mean, there was other things, obviously, that were helping fund this and other investments that were pulled out of and put into this. So it wasn't all T-shirts.
Okay.
I wish I was that successful. And, I didn't do that much to it. Oddly enough, that's the one famous house that I never actually got to sleep at. It was only the one that I owned. But, the money was taken out of the house and put into a bunch of collectible furniture. So that was that. So it got kind of shut down at that point, and then I ultimately just ended up moving to Switzerland, so we just ended up selling it. But Frank Gamwell, the current owner, has done a considerable restoration, and he got Best Restoration 2016. It wouldn't be what staunch restorationists and preservationists like myself would be considered like the A++, but Frank is an A++ guy, and things that he did take out originally, and this should be a lesson for all of you that own these houses. If you do feel like making a bathroom livable, save the stuff. Document where it went exactly, take very good pictures, measurements, and then actually he has a shed, an extra storage space down there on the property where he is cataloged and nicely stored all of the elements that he could so that if someone bought it at a later date, they could bring it back.
It's like keeping a tux for your G.I. Joe in case you want to bring it back for a different occasion.
Yeah, in case you got to go to the prom with Snake Eyes.
Exactly, yeah.
I did not know that G.I. Joes came with tuxes.
I really think that what Frank did was very good, and I think that would be a great direction to see these going if people want to make them livable, because all too often you hear about people pulling out built-ins and then thinking about what to do with them later. And I swear I can't even believe this. I'm not making it up, but I think they even have still kept taking stuff out of the Lovell Beach house up to a couple of years ago. And, word of phone calls going to people like, hey, you want this stuff we just took out? You want a Schindler? Otherwise, it's just sitting on the side of the house, and then nobody gets it, and I think the rain destroys it. Still happening.
Lyra, when the Lovell Health House premiered, it became an instant celebrity. Thousands of Los Angelinos went up the hill in Griffith Park to tour the new house. What was that like at the time, and what kind of sensation was it?
Well, it was December 1929, which, we're coming up on the 90th anniversary of that. And, as I said, Philip Lovell had this health column in the Los Angeles Times for many years. It was called Care of the Body. And he had quite a following, as you said at the beginning of the show, this region had been a place that attracted people interested in either seeking a cure or seeking some kind of alternative lifestyle, really since, probably the 1870s. And so you had a huge number of people that were interested in health and healthy eating and trying anything, whether it was a conventional medicine or what we would today call quacks, which Los Angeles was just really had an endless number of, it seemed.
Really? There are quacks in Los Angeles? I had no idea.
And have been for years.
It's one of our great historical identities, I suppose. And so he had this newspaper column, and people wrote him letters about all kinds of things, and he, seemed like an expert on everything, whether it was exactly what to eat or how to cure your cancer through sunbathing or how to have a painless childbirth through eating, raw vegetables, all of these kinds of ideas.
I bet that didn't work out so well.
Yeah. Here's some broccoli, hon.
Now push.
So he had started in the mid-1920s, writing more about architecture and the impact that your housing would have on your health. And he even invited Rudolph Schindler to do a few guest columns. You know, they were friends, and he had commissioned Schindler to build 3 different vacation homes for him. So his readers were used to him, I think, by 1929. They were used to him talking about, you know, not only the evils of pharmacists and the curative powers of raw vegetables, but also how important the hygiene and light-giving qualities of your house was. So he announced in his newspaper column that he was going to have an open house. And I think a lot of his readers they knew he was building this house and that he was excited about it and that he had this exotic Viennese architect working on it. And he opened the doors on, I think, just two weekends in a row. And yes, hundreds of people, if not thousands of Angelenos, drove up the hill and came out and toured this house. And it was in the international style, is what it came to be called. But I think at the time, everyone who came in and saw it were just astonished, and they had never seen anything like this.
Why did Lovell choose Neutra over Schindler?
Well, that is a question that has, there's a lot of different theories and a lot of controversy, and I'm not sure even if anyone truly knows, but some speculation is that, you know, some of the houses that Schindler built didn't work out very well. They were structurally not very sound. I think one of them, like the roof collapsed as soon as there was a snowstorm, and other issues that the family didn't particularly, you know, Schindler was so much of an artist, so they were these like incredibly beautiful sculptural buildings, but they weren't necessarily great to live in or functional. And I think that when they met Neutra, and you know, he had spent several more years in Europe than Schindler had and absorbed the kind of latest ideas about modernism and even steel construction and this kind of very forward-looking and machine-for-living kind of ideas. And I think that Lovell was just very excited and wanted to try something new, and their partnership ended up resulting in this incredible, iconic house.
Well, in the 90-year-old gossip department, didn't Schindler sleep with Lovell's wife?
What?
Well, yeah, that's the story also. Yeah.
I mean, there is some of a factor there, yeah?
Not so breaking news.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what kind of evidence exactly exists, but yes, that is one of the stories, is that.
I think I'll pick Neutra. Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the stories. Because they were all, as I said before, they were all spending a lot of time together, and Rudolph Schindler was sort of known for a wandering eye.
Yes, he was.
Isn't it kind of ironic, though, when you talk about people sleeping with people? It's like, aren't you doing very much exactly the opposite of actually slumbering when you're doing the act of sleeping with someone?
No, I've never thought about that before, Josh, but yes, you're absolutely right.
Well, you need the large baskets for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need a big sleeping basket if you want to.
Double sleeping basket.
Right.
Somebody.
Yes. So at least whatever they were doing in the healing climate outdoors.
That's right.
Yes.
It seems like a lot of the ideas behind these houses were sort of a scattershot collection of things that seem like quackery and things that actually sort of hit it on the head one way or the other. The psychological aspect of bringing the indoors outdoors and the clean living. And
let's not forget the free love movement, which was also booming about the time.
Right.
And Schindler was an ambassador, evidently.
And years later in California, it really flourished. Was diet part of this at all? Oh, well, I guess we were talking about the vegetables.
The broccoli for pregnancy.
Yes, and actually, at least in this house, in the Health House, Neutra had interviewed the Lovells about their vegetarian diet, which, of course, in the 1920s was extremely unusual, although slightly less unusual in Los Angeles. And they had a personal chef named Mrs. Westerman, and she was also interviewed about her needs in the kitchen, and Neutra ended up designing a rather different kind of kitchen for their unconventional diet.
And what was the diet like?
Well, it was just, there was no meat consumed at all, and no caffeine, no alcohol. All of these things were considered sort of toxic. There was a real emphasis on live foods at the time. The idea was that if you ate, a head of lettuce, your body absorbed the sun's energy, Whereas if you ate a piece of meat, that was just something dead, and it would just sit in your body forever and kind of slow you down. So these live foods, which was pretty much raw produce, they were considered energy-giving. And these other stimulants and so on, they would slow you down, and they would dirty the temple of your body.
Ooh. And fast forward 60 years, you have Whole Foods stores, which is kind of like live foods. Right. Same principle, right?
Yeah, and raw foods.
Yeah, I mean, these people, the Lovells were very ahead of their time. All of their ideas about diet and lifestyle, they really exploded. And, Lovell later said when he was being interviewed, maybe, after the 1960s, he said that he and Schindler and Neutra were really the hippies of their time. But of course, that was long before the word was even used.
Oh, yeah. The whole vibe in the 20s in L.A. was this whole opening up of progressive ideas in education and performing arts and architecture, lifestyle, diet, exercise, everything. And, of course, it came to be looked on as something scandalous, self-indulging by the more conservative East. I think that's the point at which the word California became an adjective, right? To describe that California lifestyle. Yes,
just complete wackiness.
Josh, you have a big job on your hands now as the resident manager / custodian / restoration guy. But one of the things you're doing, which has not happened for a long time, I guess, probably since the 30s, is you are running tours.
Yes, that's correct. In fact, the last person to do what I've been doing was Neutra himself, obviously skipping out on the whole Neutra's great career and amazing architect part of it, because he was formulating it at that time. And I got to say, it's been a real pleasure, to see people's faces and just their reactions to finally enter this beast and finally get inside from all over the world. I'll finish tours with Germans and have French right after that, and then some people from Belgium after that, and then some typical Los Angeles people, following that. It's just literally all over the world. It's amazing.
How do they get in touch with you?
You can send an email to Lovell Health House Tours @gmail.com. That's Lovell Health House Tours @gmail.com.
That's Lovell Health House Tours @gmail.com.
Nietzsche.
No. It's Lovell Health House Tours @gmail.com.
Okay. All right. We'll call you.
We do have like a Saturday walk-up, which it correlates with VDL, Neutra's own house over there by the reservoir. And actually, it was interesting because someone came up one day and they were like, wow, this is, there's only 2 Neutra houses in the world that you can have public access to. And I was like, wow, that's pretty incredible that one's his own house and the other one's the Lovell Health House. Kind of a good duo.
Yeah.
That's great. Although, I want to say that's not true anymore. I think that there are a couple of them in Texas and back east that are also open as well.
Oh, you're right. The Krager House in Brownsville,
yeah.
I think, because that's through a university. That's right.
Right.
That's right. I stand corrected.
But it sounded good.
Yeah, it did sound great.
It
okay.
did, right?
Is the house for sale? I mean, can someone come make an offer on it?
This has been asked multiple times, and it's been answered multiple times. I mean, people can do what they want.
So it's not really been answered. Answered and not answered.
I mean, look, you can imagine the offers that have been coming up to this door for the last 50 years. It's never stopped, right? Everyone's always got to give it a shot. Now there's probably a better chance that, giving it a shot might be actually something that would work in your favor. But, the family's just going about their business right now and just dealing with all the personal stuff. And like I said, nothing stops anybody from doing anything they don't want to do or do, minus actually entering the house forcefully.
Well, thank you for that non-answer, Mr. President. Okay.
We are, by the way, though, we are curious about. There's been in the real estate circles a lowball offer that's been circulating that is often an entry point of conversation from realtors trying to represent the family.
Yeah.
And if you know this lowball offer or who did it, we would love to find out.
Okay, well, I will set our informants out onto this right away and see if we can produce this information for you.
Yeah, it's super curious because over here, it's crickets. We've never heard about this.
Let's talk a little bit about the lovely Betty Topper. She was the queen of the house for almost 60 years and really is the reason why it's still around.
She's amazing. I mean, she has definitely got that entry point of, like, women in modernist history. She, you know, has just been one of the best caretakers, specifically this house. I literally believe in miracles after Betty Topper. I mean, the fact that there's certain things that were not removed. Ken told me stories about how she would try every once in a while to introduce some type of new design or arrangement, and it just never worked, you know. I mean, talk about a machine for a living. It's like trying to rearrange an automobile, like a Ferrari or a Porsche to your taste. It's like, no, Porsche designed it right. And so as Betty would try different things, it just wouldn't work out, and she'd bring it back and just kind of met the house on the house's terms. And I think it dramatically changed the way that she would ultimately live her life to come to the terms of the house. And when she did do little things, like the little clock that she put up in the kitchen, it was in the vein of, I think, what Neutra would put a smile on his face. You know, she did all right.
Lyra, my last question to you is, of all the things that you researched in your book, all the cures and different techniques and methodologies that generated in California, what has really persisted? What has worked the best over time?
Well, I'm not a nutritionist or a doctor, so in terms of, you know, evidence-based health...
You can just guess, Lyra, if you want.
Okay. Well, you know, one of the things that I found very fascinating was the actual value of the sun cure. You know, I feel like, at least in my generation, I was pretty much raised in a sunblock and generation, and feeling a lot of fear about, you know, the ozone layer and skin cancer and so on. I think this is how most of us have felt, at least in America, for decades. But as it turns out, there was recent research, and I don't know if this has happened. This happened to me. I went in for a checkup, and my doctor said, you have low vitamin D. Take these pills. And I said, how is this possible? I live in Southern California. But, you know, she pointed out that I'm wearing sunblock all the time, or I work in an office, or I drive in a car, and so on. So that was astonishing to me. And doctors are very interested in vitamin D right now because in the last maybe 15 years or so, they've been doing a lot of research into it and looking into it and realizing that it has a lot more healing qualities than they had known. So what was very interesting to me was that, you know, back in the turn of the 20th century, there were all of these, what we would consider quack doctors who were running around talking about the healing sun. And, you know, there were doctors in the south of France that had their patients lie out covered by a sheet, and they would roll the sheet up to expose like 1 inch of their body at a time for this like very complicated heliotherapy, as they called it. So it all just seemed kind of silly. And it's only been recently that doctors have realized that vitamin D actually strengthens your bones and could have, in fact, fought tuberculosis.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't a perfect cure, but
it helped.
Only now is science catching up and saying that, hey, some of those quacks were onto something.
And in our efforts to try and reduce skin cancer, we're starving our bodies of vitamin D. So
we are.
You have to figure out a way around that.
We need some new architecture that'll address this.
There you go.
Exactly.
Lyra and Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, wonderful to be here.
Dropping by the studio, jazz and blues musician Valerie Wood is from the heart of Nashville. Not Tennessee, but good old North Carolina. I first heard Valerie's music 7 years ago when she was with the group A Mad Affair. And it was in my living room when what was then North Carolina Modernist hosted one of our famous Modstruck parties. Recently, she performed at McConnell Studios for the Matsumoto Prize Awards, and it's such a treat to have Valerie here with a song made famous by Nina Simone, My Baby Just Cares for Me.
My baby don't care for shows. My baby don't care for clothes. My baby cares for me. My baby don't care for cars and races. My baby don't care for, don't care for hot on places. Liz Taylor is not his style, and even Lana Turner's smile is something he can't see. My baby don't care who knows it. My baby just cares for me. My baby don't care for shows, and he don't even care for clothes. He cares for me. My baby don't care for cars and races. My baby don't care for hearts on places. Blake Lively is not his style, and even Kate Upton's smile. Oh, something he can't see. My baby don't care. He don't care who knows it. My baby just cares for me.
Wow, that was amazing. I've got chills over here.
Oh, thank you so much.
That is awesome.
It's very kind. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
I was wandering around YouTube, and you have some great videos. And the one that struck me the most was of you and your former group as Muppets. How did that come about?
Well, to completely be transparent and out myself,
okay,
as a very silly girl, I love the Muppets. I have always been a giant fan of Jim Henson. He is a hero to me because he shows that you can use your creativity to change hearts and therefore change the world. And, you know, the Muppets are also different, and yet they get along, and they've got this beautiful community, and they're just fun. So I came up with this silly little song, and I think it was my sister that said, you should turn that into a Muppets. Like, that should be a Muppet thing. So we just went forward with it. And it was really fun.
and where do you go to get Muppets that look like you?
Well, that was part of the journey. Is I actually checked in with some people who are professional puppet makers and realized very quickly it was out of the budget.
Yeah, I imagine that's expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. But so what we ended up doing, we're buying these Muppet bodies called Who's-Its or What's-Its, I can't remember. And at the time, they were for sale, and they're sort of like Mr. Potato Heads, but for Muppets, where you can put on your own eyes and your own everything.
Oh, yeah.
And that only got us so far. So we ended up, really specializing them, doing our own hair, making our own papier-mâché instruments and things like that. But yeah, I love
the cello in there is great, where he's just sort of bapping on the cello with his hand.
The upright bass, right?
Yeah,
right.
That's great.
Well, thank you.
That's really great. These Foolish Things has been performed by Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, and most recently, Michael Bublé. So sit back, sip your margarita at the Purple Palm in Palm Springs, if you're lucky enough to be there, and enjoy another song from Valerie Wood.
A cigarette that bears a lipstick's traces, an airline ticket to romantic places, and still my heart has wings. These foolish things remind me of you. Tinkling piano in the next apartment, those stumbling words that told you what my heart meant, a fairground's painted swings. These foolish things remind me of you. Winds of March that made my heart a dancer, a telephone that rings, but who's to answer? Oh, how the ghost of you clings. These foolish things remind me of you. That made my heart a dancer, a telephone that rings, but who's to answer? Oh, how the ghost of you clings. These foolish things remind me of you.
Thanks for listening. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for modernist houses, and nichiha.com/USModernist. Okay, take us out, Tom.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive modernist archives to hear past shows, discover 7,000 mid-century houses, and access 2.6 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. Contact George Smart at george@usmodernist.org or via Instagram at mr.modernism. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not her real name, researches guests from her evil lair underneath Whole Foods. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I will be back with another heliotherapeutic, meditative, height-weight-appropriate, chakra-aligned, kundalini-centered, vegetarian cat-cow downward dog, California Here We Come edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.